This is the section where we do jokes. 9/11.
I'm sorry for the video. It's like showing my ass. My ass. Dude. Cog. I'm like, dude. Ass. Cog. Dude. Cog. Dude. Cog. Oh, fuck that bitch. Cog.
You fucking nerds are wrecking it.
Dude.
You fucking nerds. You fucking nerds.
Ass.
And then fuck them all, man. Fuck Aquaman, fuck Wonder Woman, fuck Flash, fuck Cyborg, fuck Thor, fuck Hulk, fuck Black Widow, god damn it, man. Fuck Hawkeye, fuck, god damn it. Fuck Black Panther, fuck him too, fuck Black Panther. That's why you fucking nerds are wrecking it. You're ruining everything.
What is up, fellow YouTubers?
Time for a new one. It's episode 136. This one's about an astoundingly underrated, undermentioned, and criminally unknown band by the name of Quartz, who are from Birmingham in England.
Get your hand off my penis!
In the 70s. Now, that trio of descriptors could also identify two other slightly more well-known bands by the name of Black Sabbath and Judas Priest, and in the case of the former, Quartz is heavily connected to Black Sabbath. One, because Tony Iommi, the guitarist of Black Sabbath, perhaps you've heard of him, produced the first Quartz album, and two, because then after that first album, Jeff Nichols, the one of the guitarists, and he also did keyboards and whatnot on that first Quartz album, ended up basically joining Black Sabbath for about 30 years. He's kind of the vaguely credited keyboardist on most Sabbath stuff in the late 70s all through the 80s and the 90s. As an interesting aside, Rick Wakeman from the band Yes did keyboards for Black Sabbath right before Jeff Nichols ended up getting drafted for it because him and Tony were friends. And then after Jeff Nichols kind of drifted away from being in Black Sabbath, Adam Wakeman, Rick Wakeman's son, ended up doing a lot of keyboard work for Black Sabbath. So pretty interesting chain of events as far as the keyboard seat in Black Sabbath goes that a lot of people don't really know about. That's right, though. We're not here to talk about various aspects of Black Sabbath trivia. We're here to talk about Quartz. We're here to talk about their first album. As I mentioned, it was produced by Tony Iommi, and it shows. Listen to that 70s fuzz, man. That sounds a whole lot like Black Sabbath aesthetically. Musically, it doesn't really sound like what Black Sabbath was doing at the time. It's actually pretty original. It's kind of weird, almost semi-folky, heavy on the harmonies. So like proto-new wave of British heavy metal, but at the same time it's still very fuzzy and damp sounding. So interesting sound. Vocals here are Mick Taylor, who has a pretty unique style. It's a bit softer, almost more kind of 70s rock than one would normally expect on fairly heavy material. Doing the same thing as Aria was doing last week, kind of like weaving these vocal phrases around heavier riffs, like this one right here. We also have that same bass line, the Eye of the Tiger bass line, except this is pre-Eye of the Tiger, pre-Heaven and Hell, pre-everything. This might be the first time this kind of bass line comes up, that thing right there. Very interesting, because so many bands did that later, but this is 1977. It's the same year as the first Star Wars movie, everybody. So that's definitely ahead of its time, man.
You are the most dangerous man I've ever met, and you're wacky.
So later in the song, we get into one of these kind of very epic turnarounds. Now this is something Sabbath were also doing around the same time, kind of bipartite song structures, a definite part 1 and part 2 to most of the heavy metal numbers on this record. So after we've looped through that more atmospheric section, we get into this very kind of proto-thrashy, jumpy, bouncy thing. It's still utilizing notes of the melody that was kind of driving the earlier portion of the song, but it's doing so in a completely different manner. Mainline Riders might be a song about space travel, might be a song about spiritual something or other, might be a song about doing drugs. Probably all of them at the same time. But yeah, the whole heavy bass with more atmospheric, melodic guitar stuff and epic soaring vocals, well, this is what Black Sabbath's doing in like 1980. So how interesting is that, you know? Quartz, clearly influenced by Black Sabbath in a very early era of heavy metal. But then Quartz comes up with certain compositional techniques that go on to influence Black Sabbath later on. A little bit of back and forth. Tony Iommi produces their album, and then he likes what he hears, ends up utilizing it in his own music down the road. Here's my favorite song on this Quartz album. It's called Round and Round. And you can tell it's great just by these opening guitar harmonies here. They've taken that Tony Iommi idea of these sort of pentatonic melodies, but the fact that they have two guitarists means they can do some interesting kind of layered harmonies with it. Alright, here's the vocals leading it, and then the guitar response. Like, almost kind of Thin Lizzy-ish, but not quite. Definitely their own style. This song also has the bipartite structure of Mainline Riders, but even more noticeably so.
If you don't get some of this tactical soap for yourself, you're being an absolute tool, my dude.
So it all kind of collapses into this softer 70s rock section, very proggy, especially with those organs and the layered vocals. This could be on like a Yes album or something. Maybe not as complex as that, but you get what I'm saying. But then we climb out of it with an heavy, ponderous, magnificently stately riff. It's catchy, it's authoritative. It's really, really good stuff, YouTube. Highly recommend this album. Not only is that particular little song turnaround stately and authoritative and all those other effusive adjectives I utilized, it's also something that influenced later Black Sabbath yet again. This is Dirty Women, a song they put out about a year after that Quartz album, and we got the 70s build-up leading into a very stately kind of marching style riff. And I could definitely hear echoes of what Quartz was doing and what Black Sabbath is doing here. Incidentally, anybody tells you Technical Ecstasy and Never Say Die are shitty Sabbath albums, don't listen to them. They're full of shit. Those albums are great. They're just different than other Sabbath stuff. So after that, Jeff Nichols, kind of like one of the main dudes behind the band, gets poached away from Quartz by Black Sabbath, the band that they cross-pollinated with so much. You think that would be the end of Quartz? No, sir, because 1980, I want to say, rolls around. We get the second Quartz album, which is, again, fairly ahead of its time in how heavy it is. Here's the title track, Stand Up and Fight, which has a fairly complex riff for the time. It's got little bends in it, little sections and whatnot. Nice little counterpoint to it, too. Very effective utilization of the riff pair, the dominant compositional technique of most 80s metal to follow. The sound, of course, is quite a bit heavier this time around. Not actually produced by Tony Iommi, although Ozzy Osbourne himself provided guest vocals on this album, like guest backing vocals. Obviously, this is still the main Quartz dude singing.
You got to stick together. Don't let them walk all over you.
Very, very heavy.
You gotta stand up and fight.
Lyrics might be a little cheesy for some, but I think they fit the brutish nature of the song well. A really intelligent placement of these vocals here. This album isn't quite as 70s and fluffy as their early stuff, but it's still good.
Who afraid of egg fried rice?
And once again, that 1-2 structure, we have that riff from earlier getting a substantial makeover in the second half of the song as solos are played over it. Really dig this guy's vocals. Surprised this album isn't bigger than it is as far as like very, very early 80s metal goes. fade out thingy there. You know, playing that same riff, but just kind of. So that's all well and good. Quartz proved that they could survive without Jeff Nichols because they still have a substantial amount of core band members. You got Mick Hopkins on guitar still. You still got Derek Arnold on bass and Malcolm Cope on drums. Unfortunately, Mick Taylor ends up leaving after that album, and we gotta wait until 1983 to get the follow-up, Against All Odds, which is very suitably titled because this album almost didn't come out. They had to work at 3 different studios on it, hence the 3 jet fighters taken off on the album cover. You have a different vocalist, Jeff Bate, who never did anything else, which is unfortunate because I think he's got a good voice. So Against All Odds, would this band manage to continue surviving and thriving in the metal world of the 80s? Well, so this album's interesting because it's like an alternate history version of where metal could have gone in the 80s if everybody had listened to those later Black Sabbath albums and gone heavier on the keyboards and the atmosphere while still retaining the heaviness. Which gives you some very interesting stuff. We got that Eye of the Tiger bass line again with the harmonies and whatnot, but we got these droning keyboards in the background. And it might be a bit light and fluffy for some of you, but I think it's heavy in its own way. And plus, we still got fuzzy guitars in there. But yeah, it's very atmospheric, almost progressive. New vocalist is doing a good job. These pianos, I like them. They're interesting. And then kind of going in and out of the more ethereal stuff and this heavier, fuzzed out Tony Iommi sounding guitars. Not really something a lot of bands did at the time or even nowadays, this specific mixture of aesthetics. Now that is cool. Got those epic harmonies. Working really well with that piano, and it's heavy as hell during the chorus, I would say. And I fucking love guitar harmonies, but this idea of kind of a driving, very simplistic pulsing beat around which you kind of weave your melodies in and out with lots of keyboards and progressive touches. I mean, nobody was doing that at the time quite the same way that Quartz were, and nowadays, occasionally you'll see bands pick up on similar ideas. As in the case of the similarly underrated band, another one of my favorites, Godgory, who are doing some Quartz-style stuff in a melodic death metal context on their last couple albums. See what I mean? Same pulsing beat, same utilization of pianos and whatnot, with the harmonies and everything. It's an interesting way to do music, and apart from Godgory, like, not too many bands picked up on it. I don't even know if Godgory were even directly influenced by Quartz, although they did cover an Accept song as the closing track on the album I just played you, so I would say they're pretty familiar with more obscure aspects of 70s and 80s metal. For more information on Godgory, I did an episode on them a while back, and it's actually probably my favorite thumbnail that I've ever made for an episode thus far, so go and check that out.
안녕, 나는 총무부장이야.
But don't you worry, it's not all light and fluffy, happy, proggy, whatnot on that final 80s Quartz album. Because it features what's probably Quartz's heaviest song ever, the magnificent Buried Alive, which has a wonderfully fuzzy guitar tone leading into some atmospherics rather reminiscent of the heavier moments of Diamond Head, that old new wave of British heavy metal band, with the spooky wordless vocals and whatnot. Like, this feels downright threatening, especially for Quartz, which is usually on the lighter end of the metal spectrum. Usually they're lithium, this time they've gone full polonium. Heavy fucking metal, dude. Here's a little transition bit. Kind of weird, almost kind of proto-thrash. Good stuff. Very heavy for 1983, very heavy nowadays. But with proggy transitions still intact, such as the one you just mentioned.
If you really want a three-ring circus, look no further than Congress.
The chorus is where it gets a bit lighter, but I think it's pretty cool. I like that mournful, clean guitar line over the chugging riffs. The layered choir vocals might be a bit much for some people, but it kind of goes with the territory. If you're listening to a band like Quartz that are clearly still having their heads in the 70s, despite it being 1983, I'm wondering if maybe that's why Quartz never made it that big, since they were so 70s sounding, despite all the new innovations they brought to metal. They were still very 70s sounding well into the mid-80s. Plus, they lost such a titan of metal music, Jeff Nichols, to Black Sabbath. But, you know, against all odds, they put out a great album, and it was called Against All Odds. There's also, well, you know, they fucking broke up after that. Sorry, fam. They did get back together relatively recently, and they put out a new album, which I also haven't listened to yet. But Noity from Manila Road told me it was a good album. And it's got Mick Taylor back on vocals, and Jeff Nichols is back in the band. So it's probably pretty freaking good. I just haven't heard it yet.
I'm so sorry.
Unfortunately, there's no more Quartz albums because Mick Taylor and Jeff Nichols both passed away in 2016, 2017 respectively. So that's sad, but hopefully this can put a spotlight on some of the work these guys did, making some great metal that was perhaps more influential in the underground than it was given credit for. I leave you with that. Go and check out some Quartz, and I'll see you around. Bye-bye. Have a good week or something.
No!
Gentlemen, this is Democracy Manifest. And you, sir, are you waiting to receive my limp penis? What is the charge? Eating a meal? A succulent Chinese meal? Get your hand off my penis! Get your hand off my penis!